Let's dive into one of the most dramatic and influential moments in the history of ideas, the final hours of Socrates. Imagine this: you've been condemned to death by your own city, Athens. Do you spend your last day filled with fear, with regret? Well, if you're Socrates, you spend it in a lively philosophical debate about what death even is, and what, if anything, comes next. We're going to unpack all of this through the eyes of his most brilliant student, Plato, in his dialogue, the Phaedo.
Right out of the gate, Socrates drops this bombshell on his friends. He says that a true philosopher is basically practicing how to die. A pretty strange thing to say, right? It sounds almost morbid. But stick with me, because this single idea is the key that unlocks his entire worldview and explains everything that's about to happen.
And this really is the central mystery, isn't it? I mean, his friends are there, they're literally weeping. The executioner is getting the poison ready, and Socrates, he's totally calm, maybe even a little cheerful. Why? What does he know that they don't? Well, his answer to that question is what we're here to explore. It's one of the first and most famous arguments for the immortality of the soul.
Okay, so before we can even get to his arguments, we have to really set the scene and wrap our heads around Socrates' radical view of what philosophy is even for.
So picture it. We're in a prison cell in Athens. Socrates' chains have just been taken off for the last time. His wife, Xanthippe, has just been led away crying, and his closest friends are gathered around him. They think they're there to comfort him in his final moments. But, in a classic Socrates move, he flips the script and ends up comforting them with pure, powerful logic. So this brings us right to the heart of why he's so unafraid. He basically says, the body is like a prison for the soul. It's always distracting us with hunger, desires, pain, and our senses, which can't be trusted anyway. He argues that a philosopher's whole life is one long attempt to free the soul from all that noise, to get a glimpse of pure, unadulterated truth. So for him, death isn't the end, it's the ultimate liberation. It's the moment he's been training for his entire life. But you can bet his friends aren't just going to take his word for it. They're worried his soul is just going to poof, vanish like a puff of smoke. So Socrates, ever the teacher, decides to lay out a series of logical proofs to show them why the soul has to be immortal. He really builds his case piece by piece. First up is the argument from opposites. Everything he says comes from its opposite. Bigger comes from smaller. Waking comes from sleeping. So it only makes sense that life must come from death and death from life, in an endless cycle. Then he hits them with the theory of recollection. Think about it. How do you know what a perfect circle is? Or what perfect justice is? You've never actually seen a truly perfect one in this messy physical world. Socrates says that's because we're not learning these things for the first time, we're remembering them from a time before we were born, when our souls knew these perfect forms. And if the soul existed before birth, well, it probably exists after death. And finally, there's the argument from affinity. This last point really comes down to a simple comparison. Look at the body. You can see it, you can touch it, it's always changing, and eventually it falls apart. Now think about the soul. It's invisible. It's what does the thinking. It's what's in charge. Socrates says the soul clearly belongs to a different category of things, the realm of the divine, the unchanging, the eternal. It's like the difference between a crumbling statue and the timeless idea of beauty itself. The soul is like the idea, not the statue.
Now, what makes this dialogue so brilliant is that Plato doesn't just give us a lecture from Socrates. He shows us a real live debate. His friends Simmias and Sabes are smart guys, and they come back with two really clever objections that almost completely unravel Socrates' arguments. This is where the intellectual drama really heats up.
Simmias throws out this beautiful and powerful analogy. He says, hey Socrates, what if the soul isn't a thing at all? What if it's more like the music that comes from a lyre? The soul is the harmony of all our physical bits and pieces working together. And if that's the case, well, when the body, the lyre, is destroyed at death, the harmony just stops. It vanishes. It's a really compelling argument for a purely material view of consciousness.
But Socrates, being Socrates, masterfully picks this apart. He makes 2 points. First, he says a harmony can exist before the lyre is built and tuned, right? But he reminds Simmias they already agreed that the soul does pre-exist the body because of that whole theory of recollection. And second, the music is totally dependent on the instrument. It can't tell the lyre what to do. But our souls, they are constantly fighting with our bodies, telling them no to that extra piece of cake or to get out of bed. The soul is in command, so it can't just be an effect of the body.
Just when you think Socrates is won, Cebes comes in with an even tougher objection. He says, okay, Socrates, I'll give you that the soul is way more durable than the body. It's like a weaver who makes and wears out many coats in his lifetime. The weaver lasts longer than any single coat, but the weaver himself eventually dies. How do we know, Cebius asks, that this body isn't the soul's very last coat? How do we know it's not just long-lasting, but truly eternal? It's a brilliant question.
This challenge forces Socrates to play his final, most powerful card. He argues that the soul is the very essence of life itself. It's the thing that, by its very nature, brings life to a body. It's what makes a body alive. And because of that, it cannot possibly admit its opposite, which is death. It's just like the number 3 can never become an even number, or how fire can never become cold. When death approaches the body, the soul doesn't die. It simply has to withdraw, retreating unharmed. By its very definition, it is deathless.
And with that final argument, his friends are finally quieted, if not 100% convinced. Socrates then calmly drinks the hemlock and passes away. But the ideas that were born in that prison cell, well, they would go on to fundamentally change the world.
Honestly, it's hard to exaggerate the impact of this one conversation. It basically embedded the idea of a separate soul and body, dualism, into the DNA of Western thought for thousands of years. It's also one of our best introductions to Plato's famous theory of forms, this radical idea that the abstract world of concepts is actually more real than the physical world. And of course, this framework became hugely influential for Christian, Islamic, and Jewish ideas about the soul and the afterlife. And beyond all the philosophy, the image of Socrates facing death with nothing but calm reason, it remains the ultimate model of intellectual courage.
When you boil it all down, the Phaedo isn't just some abstract intellectual exercise. It's making a profound point about how we should live. For Socrates and Plato, a life spent chasing wisdom and practicing virtue isn't just about being a good person here and now. It's about caring for the one thing you'll take with you, your soul, and preparing it for its great journey.
So the Phaedo doesn't just give us answers, it pulls us right into the conversation. On his very last day, Socrates used every tool he had, logic, metaphor, conviction, to make his case. And that leaves a big question for us, nearly 2,500 years later, still facing the same mysteries. What case would you make?
This is for entertainment and educational purposes only.